everyone. Hopefully you're a little bit more awake now. Before I start, just a show of hands, how many people have heard of Advent of Code before? Oh, hello. How many people have finished at least one puzzle, have at least one star in their account? How many people have finished all of the stars of the year? There's a couple hands still up. Anybody done all of the years? Really? Yeah. Nice shirt. 200 stars, yeah. Well done. Soon to be 250. Yeah, so I'm Eric Wastl. I'm the creator of Advent of Code, and I'm going to give you a little behind-the-scenes look of what goes on to make this all happen. Who let me on stage anyway? Well, I used to make large-scale web applications for service providers. Currently, I work on infrastructure for an auction system in Buffalo. I also run programming challenges, like Advent of Code. I also make tools for games. Anoikis, any Eve players? No? No Eve players? Eve Online. Okay, one Eve player. And some other games. I make fun of programming languages. If you've been to these websites, those are me as well. And I make lots of other random things. Notably, Spice Girls is not on this list. But we're not here to talk about any of those. We're here to talk about Advent of Code. What's Advent of Code? Well, I need to rewind a few months, a few years even, to 2015. So here's a question for you. It's 2015. What if you are here? Let me zoom in a little, sorry. What if you're here at this table of this little cafe in Salem, Massachusetts, and all you have is a pen, a few napkins, a few weeks until Christmas, a random memory of Advent calendars, and a passion for programming puzzles and helping people learn to become better programmers? The answer, of course, Advent of Code. Advent calendars plus programming puzzles. So, in case you're not familiar, an Advent calendars are these things. They're the things that you get during Christmas, typically during the season of Advent, thus the name. And there's like 25-ish boxes, sometimes 24, depending on how you celebrate. And inside of each one of these is a little door, and once a day you open it up and you get something fun inside. You get a little toy, or a little chocolate, or, you know, something else. Maybe a programming puzzle might be in there. This is the one that I had growing up. You hang little ornaments on the tree. And this is what they look like on Advent of Code, or maybe this, or that. But where are the programming puzzles in these Advent calendars? Oh, they're down here. Every line of the calendar is a door that you open. And when you open it, you get a programming puzzle. And it looks like this. And you read through it, and it's got a funny story about Santa and elves. And you scroll down to the bottom, and eventually you get to a question that says, you know, what is the something something of the whatever? What's the answer? You put your answer in here. And if you get it right, you go on to part 2. And part 2 asks you some change up, some switch around, and you have to figure it out based on like a shift in requirements or something like that. And then you fill in that one, and it gives you 2 stars. Hooray! And then as you get more stars, the Advent calendar begins to fill itself in with whatever the Advent calendar does for that year. And eventually you come up to a completed Advent calendar. Hooray! So it's 2015, and over the past couple weeks, we've built this thing. And we'd like for other people to see it, so the question is, how should we host it? Okay, let's play some DevOps, right? Let's do some estimation practice, because estimating is important for capacity planning. Programming puzzles probably won't be that popular. In all honesty, not very many people like puzzles, not very many people like programming. It's probably not going to catch on. But I have a few friends that might like it, and they have a few friends that might like it. 50 people? All right. But we're good DevOps people. We're good at estimating. We're going to give ourselves a wide margin, 70. This is my real estimation from when I built it in 2015. This is actually how I did it. So I have a small personal web server. That should cover it. It'll be fine. All right, it's November 30th, 2015. Time to launch the site. How do you launch the site? You post it on Twitter. All right, well, let's check our estimation. 27 retweets. That's great. We're well within our margins. We launched the site. It's just midnight here, so this is people signing up until midnight, December 1st, 2015. I estimated 70. We got 81. That's perfect. We're well within our estimates. The server's going to do just fine. But then the puzzle unlocked. And the graph did that. And if you've ever been the person responsible for capacity planning in any kind of a system and you see this occur, the correct response is, oh no. 12 hours later, let me scale the y-axis for you here quick. Yeah, that's not good. There's my estimate down there. That's 4,000 people. All right, so we estimated 70. We actually got 4,000. We're off by 5,600% error. That's not great. Small servers, very sad. That's the technical term for it. All right, you're bad at traffic estimation. Now what? This is an interactive part. You're welcome to shout out. The server is about to fall over. The CPU load is very high. Disk usage is through the roof. It's low on memory. And if you don't act fast, 4,000 people or maybe more will not be able to do their puzzles. What do you do? Shout it out. Go ahead. Did anybody yell, shut down the Minecraft server? That helped quite a bit, actually. That saved us on a lot of memory usage. And it got us another couple hours, which was long enough to fix the second problem, which was don't create a new process for it to handle every single request. Now, hang on, what? All right, so there's a thing called CGI, which is very good for prototyping, and it's very, very simple. In any kind of Unix or Linux type environment, you have a process, and inside of a process, it takes some inputs, it takes environment variables, it takes a standard in, sometimes it takes some other file handles, and it produces standard out and standard error. In Common Gateway Interface, those are mapped to headers, request body coming in, HTTP response, and logs going out, and sometimes it'll talk to database files, API calls, stuff like that, right? The trick is that CGI does this once per request, which, you know, if you've got 70 users, that's fine. If you've got 4,000 users, you do not want this, but fortunately, we very, very rapidly switched to fast CGI, which makes the script think it's in CGI, but it actually doesn't get restarted for every user. Completely saved the event. So let's continue. Now it's 24 hours since unlock. We've done this emergency change. The graph is still doing that. That's the estimate. There's 9,000 people. This is 24 hours. We're not even that way far into the event. So hold on a second. Where did all these people come from? All right, so does anybody see the flaw in my logic when we did capacity planning earlier? Let me give you a hint. This part's recursive. And then this happened. And all of a sudden, I look the next day, and my Twitter has gone from as quiet as it normally is to exploding, and all of these people's friends are now doing my puzzles, which I did not factor into any of my capacity planning at all. 48 hours, graph is still doing this. That's now 15,000 people. That's 2 days out of the 25, so let me fast forward a little bit. The graph eventually does this. The estimate is that tiny little dot down there. This is 52,000 people. Hello, everyone. Now we're on AWS, which is going much better. Thank you very much. Now we're at 250,000 people, which is fine because on AWS I can click add another server and it just does, and that's much, much better. All right, so why do people do advent of code? Everybody has a different reason, which affects the way that you have to design the puzzles that go into it. Everybody interacts with it differently, everybody interfaces with it differently. On many user-facing applications, like the system that I work on is an auction system, like people typically have one goal. In my system, it's to buy and sell things, right? The job that I have is to buy and sell things, right? So people that are going to that site are in general for one thing, but people go to advent of code for all sorts of reasons. And sure, they're solving puzzles, but their goal in solving the puzzle and what they intend to get out of it is completely different from person to person. Some people just do them for practice problems. They're rusty on something and they want to improve, or they want to learn a new programming language. All right, so the problems should probably be good for those sorts of people. Some people use them for interview preparation. There are companies that ask interview questions that are similar to Advent of Code problems. That's a pretty good way to prepare for those sorts of interviews. There are a lot of companies that do it for like a corporate training sort of thing. So a bunch of engineers will go into a room Friday afternoon and they'll work on a couple puzzles and work with each other and stuff, and that's very cool. But it's a completely different atmosphere and environment than sitting at home and hacking on it at 3 a.m. because you're bored. Some people use it for a speed contest. I don't recommend this, but there is a leaderboard. Some people are very fast. And some people, especially on the subreddit, like to challenge their friends with harder versions of the puzzles. They say, well, what if instead of the input that Eric gave us, we give you this very, very bad input that completely breaks everything unless you have an ultra-optimized solution? Well, okay, and then they go and fight over who can get the fastest, the fewest number of milliseconds their solution for those. It's incredible. So who are all these people? Everyone from everywhere. A lot of people from the States, which I partly blame on things like language and partly because of networking and whatever else, but a lot of people from the States. In the States, you see especially a lot of New York and California. New York makes sense to me a little bit because it's where I'm from, so I'm imagining that my social network may be branched out from there. My best guess for California is that it's 2100 there when the puzzles unlock, which makes it a little easier for them to do. Here in Europe, you know, the countries that do it the most unlock at 5 or 6 a.m., which surprisingly get me both good and bad feedback from forcing people up at that hour. Here's somebody doing it as part of his morning routine from the shower. And I get feedback, both positive and negative, many, many times. These are just examples. Sometimes people say, you know, getting up at 5 a.m. every day is not easy, this is ridiculous, but I do it anyway. And some people say, you know, nothing can wake me up as reliably as Advent of Code did this month. And I get messages from people that are like, oh yeah, my morning routine in December is, I get up, I have breakfast, I take a shower, I do Advent of Code, I go for a run, and then I go to, like, you what? Like, you need to relax. Who are all these people? A lot of programmers, not surprisingly, given that they're programming puzzles, in pretty much any language you can think of. This is the distribution, which includes some languages that people are trying to learn, and they use Advent of Code to teach themselves programming. Rust in particular, you see a lot of people doing Advent of Code for the purpose of learning Rust, or for programmers that have never written code before, will jump into something like Python or JavaScript as their first language, and they'll use Advent of Code for that and do it alongside their friends or their colleagues. But 23,000 repositories on GitHub for Advent of Code is kind of nuts. Or some people implement it directly in hardware, which is very, very, very cool. That's an FPGA. If you've never played with one, I recommend it. It lets you literally program the hardware that it runs on, and then it runs on the hardware that you programmed. Not configuring it, but actually, like, yeah, it's cool. Companies, including, like, Facebook. I also see users in my logs from any major company you can probably name. I see Google, I see Amazon, I see, you know, Walmart Labs, I see large companies like that. Universities do it a lot. This is a picture of a university in, I think, Poland, where they translated the puzzles every day for their students, and then the students would go and do the puzzles in their native language, and then post their solutions on this wall in their student union. I see non-programmers doing it, not as often, but they do. This is a picture that somebody took when their significant other suddenly realized that this puzzle called for them to go about 800 units in one direction, and they needed a few more sheets of graph paper. They eventually got the right answer, it just took them forever. Some people do it in Excel, which is a little bit ridiculous, but it does work. Google Sheets also. Some people do it in other software. This is day 6, I think, from last year, where there was a Gantt chart and you had to figure out like what order the things go in through a dependency tree. They just loaded it up into their project management program and it gave them the answer, which is very, very cool. Some people pick worse solutions, like implementing an Advent of Code, implementing Advent of Code in Minecraft, excuse me. Yes, really, and this is the right answer. So let's talk about puzzle design a little bit. So Advent of Code comes with its own limitations on top of these that I'll get to in a moment, but there are a couple things that I've learned about making good puzzles that apply anywhere. And also, when I say puzzle here, I don't necessarily mean like a riddle or a brain teaser or the kinds of things you see on Advent of Code when you're doing stuff over the month. But this also includes things like if you're teaching a topic in a classroom setting, or if you're teaching a topic in a corporate environment to some colleagues or something like that, and you're looking to give them a way to exercise their skill in maybe a workshop type setting, or any kind of a situation where you just want them to have some hands-on experience of the thing that you're teaching them, there are some important properties when you're doing that. One of them is to avoid ambiguity, which sounds obvious, but when you're dealing with 250,000 people, there are a lot of ways that different cultures or just different types of skimming the text can lead to different ways that there are misunderstandings. And so it's important to not just be clear in the text, but to be clear in as many different ways as possible. You want to avoid sentence structure and interpretations and stuff that I've got up here. I don't need to read my slides to you, but it's suddenly significantly more important than you might expect for a smaller crowd. Because Advent of Code is used as a learning tool for people that are not programmers or that are very entry-level programmers or people that haven't gone to university perhaps, avoid expectations of outside information, which includes things like you can't ask them to implement a red-black tree, you can't ask them to implement quicksort, you can't use data structure terminology almost at all, or if you do, maybe link to a document or something, but try to avoid it and make it accessible to entry-level people. Avoid requiring the user to make assumptions, especially because, and I can't stress this enough, for every sentence in the description, there is at least one user that skipped only that sentence. So if there's some key fact somewhere in the puzzle and it only appears one time, there will be users that just somehow did not read that one sentence but got all the rest of it. And finally, have other people test the thing that you've built. I did not do this the first year and somehow got by without too many issues, but ever since then I've had beta testers that have looked at the puzzles and tried them out on their own and given me feedback and worked with me on it so that I can try to build the best experience possible. So what does Advent of Code add to these requirements? Because of the way that the site works, I don't take code and run it, so I can't benchmark things, I can't look for specific properties of solutions, well, some properties, but I do have to get something from you, so I have to ask for some answer, some result to the problem, right? And in my case, I have to look for exactly one correct answer, which for some kinds of problems is very, very difficult, because if I ask, like, what is the coordinate of the point, like, 17 steps out in this maze, like there's 5 or 6 of them, so I can't ask what's the coordinate of that point because you might give any of those, and I don't want to have to disambiguate between you and somebody else's input, and you might have, gotten it a weird way or something. So I really want one exact correct answer. I want the user to be able to use any language they want. The goal here isn't to force everybody to learn Python or to learn JavaScript. The goal is to let them learn whatever they want and to make this be a tool for them to do that, which means that I'm not going to spin up a Docker instance to run your Ruby code and then see if it spit out, like I can't. That's, first of all, expensive, and second of all, there's no need for it. Third, I generate a lot of input files. Some of you may know that every user has a distinct input that's just for them. So if you're working with a friend, you're probably working on different inputs, but with the same problem statement, which means that you're still going to get different results, and you still kind of have to solve the problem on your own. 2 parts per puzzle. 2 parts per puzzle was originally a way for me to try to just add more interesting things with minimal extra work for myself, and it's turned into this thing where I can either use the first half to make sure that you're on the right track for when I actually ask the real question in the second half that I've been meaning to ask for that puzzle, or I can use it to ask the question I really wanted to ask in the first half, assuming that it's not too much of a leap, and then swap out the requirements out from underneath you and simulate like a real-world client coming to you and say, hey, we actually want the program to work like this. Is that okay? And for you to have to go, oh, that's really the worst. Now my whole architecture is invalidated and I have to start over. Or maybe you planned for it and you saw what I did. You saw what I had planned and you were ready and I changed the requirements. Oh, that's one variable. Boop. Which is why some people on the second half do it in 5 seconds and some people do it in 5 hours. It's just, I strive for variety. Variety is important because everybody's different, both in terms of their background. Some people are very good at regexes. Some people are very good at the weird assembly puzzles I put in there. Some people are very good at the like grid and cellular automata type stuff. Some people have never been exposed to any of it. And so for the people that are good at particular things, I don't want to focus the puzzles on just things that they're good at or just things that they're bad at. And for people that are beginners that have never been exposed to any of these things, my goal is to get them exposed to as many different kinds of problems as possible. Not from the point of, please implement this algorithm, but please solve this problem. By the way, this algorithm is a good way to do it, but I'm not going to tell you that, and I hope you figure it out. And if you don't, your solution will be a little bit slower, and maybe you'll talk to a friend or look on the subreddit and find out. But variety is really, really critical. And the other tricky part is difficulty calibration. There are a lot of things that go into the difficulties of the puzzles, and I try to estimate to the best of my ability what the difficulty is and where it should go in the month, and the beta testers give me feedback on how they feel the difficulty progression is and how I should rearrange puzzles sometimes. But there are a lot of factors that go into it. Sometimes a puzzle needs to go before another one because it's introducing a concept that somebody will need for a later puzzle, even if that concept is relatively hard compared to other puzzles in that part of the month. I try to put harder puzzles on weekends sometimes if possible because people typically have more time than to work. Variety means that sometimes even if I had an easier puzzle that I could have put in a spot, it's very similar to something I had just done, and so I move it later and move another one earlier. I try to have a rough progression throughout the month, but that's not always true because, as I say, the next point, off difficulty puzzles allow for pacing and prevent burnout. So if I give kind of an interesting puzzle early on that's a little bit harder, the people that are saying, well, these are all really easy, why am I doing this, all of a sudden say, there's an interesting thing here. And in the later part of the month, when everybody's like, oh, I'm exhausted, I've been doing puzzles for all the month, I give something easy and then they get a break or whatever. And also the difference between interpreted and compiled languages, both in terms of implementation time. Oftentimes it's faster to implement a solution in something that's interpreted, whereas a compiled language will run your solution more quickly. And so I have to balance the advantage you get of being in a compiled language and being able to have a less efficient solution but still get the right answer, as opposed to somebody that's in an interpreted language who implements a less efficient solution and has to wait 3 hours for their answer. And all of these things come into play when I'm trying to figure these out and arrange them. So the basic flow to build an Advent of Code puzzle is you get inspiration from somewhere, or I mean this is sort of, it's fine. Inspiration can come from things that I've been doing at work, or something that I've seen online, or something that somebody mentioned, or something, do research on it to at least try to get some fundamental understanding of the problem space and how it works. Design a puzzle, and designing a puzzle looks roughly like play with it a little bit, see what the problem space is, try to find something that would be interesting, try to find a case that gives me exactly one answer if I were to ask a question about it. Then I build some kind of an input generator, which is usually the first part of the actual code that would end up running on part of the site. And the input generator is responsible for simply spitting out a file that is a candidate for being an input file that somebody would receive. And then I build part 1 and part 2 solvers that solve that input, and at any point in this chain, the generator or the solvers are allowed to say, there's something wrong with this one's weird, I don't want to do this one, give me a new one and it'll start over, or something like that. And the part 1 and part 2 solvers have to be completely automatic for the next step, which is to generate many inputs, which happens automatically. So I say, all right, this seems good. I'm going to go to bed. You guys work on this, and over the course of either a few seconds or a few hours, they'll churn through inputs and try to find ones that are good. And sometimes that works out, and sometimes it doesn't, but eventually it'll generate a set of inputs, and if that all works out, and I don't need any further changes, then I will finally sit down and write prose that try to explain my expectations for the puzzle that I just designed and built. And if all of that made it look like this is the flow that I take to go through these steps, it's actually more like that. Which, gets there eventually, but there's a lot of reworking and rethinking and throwing out and starting over that goes on. So, some example puzzles. Here's a puzzle that asks, how many square inches of fabric are within 2 or more claims? So this is a list of claims, and it says, at these coordinates of this dimension, there is a claim on this giant rectangle of fabric. How many square inches are within 2 or more of these? People like to do visualizations, so I've included a bunch of those here. Here's a visualization of the input that I just showed. It also asks, what is the ID of the only claim that doesn't overlap? And if you haven't seen it yet, it's that one. Here's another one. This is one that has a giant list of lines that specify what guard is beginning a shift and when they wake up and fall asleep. And the question is, when is the guard awake? Like, which guard has the most minutes of sleep? Like, track it out. You have to sort all the lines chronologically, but they're all from 1518, so good luck with date libraries. They don't like dates from 1518. And then it asks, of all of the guards, which guard is the most frequently asleep on the same minute? Some people like to do data analysis, so they build things like this, which I love because I love data analysis. This is great. Some people like to build visualizations that are less about understanding the problem and more about making the elf eventually fall asleep and then wake up and run around, and then there's no guard on shift for a while, and then the next guard starts, and the next guard falls asleep for about 15 hours, and then, yeah, it's great. This is a puzzle that I especially like. It reminds me of things that I built when I was little in BASIC, trying to make like water simulations. So this puzzle says, at these XY coordinates, there are various lines that count as walls, and then water comes in from the top, and the question is, how does the water fill in this space without accounting for water pressure, stuff like that. It's meant to be a simpler version. And so some people like to render full animations of how this water propagates through their solution, through their system, for their input, what it looks like. And this is great because for the people that like to build hands-on visualizations and things that let them work with the problem tangibly, Advent of Code gives them the opportunity to do that. And for beginners that have no idea what I'm talking about, they can go to the subreddit and click around on a couple GIFs, and all of a sudden they get a full rendering that I never had to spend even more of my poor free time putting together. And so the users work together by either building things that they enjoy building or learning from the things that the people enjoyed building them, and figuring out how they work. This is another fun one. How many people here like regular expressions? Not know them, enjoy them. Yes! I love regular expressions. So I built a puzzle that was a giant scam, and I said, there is a regular expression, this thing on top here, that defines a maze, and the puzzle is specifically designed so that if you try to actually put this into a regular expression engine, it will take several years of solving to find a solution to this. But if you instead just write a program that steps through the characters and you effectively implement a simple regular expression parser, which is a sneaky way to get people to kind of get their feet wet in a real regex engine and what that might look like and feel like, then you might get somebody who builds a solution that renders it like this. And you can see the size of the maze that this giant regex input designed for them and all of the different places that it goes and the dead ends that it finds and then has to backtrack from using regex rules to do that. And this is great. I love this. This goes for a while, so we'll continue. Here's another one that just says, here's a bunch of points in space on 2D plane. Based on these rules for how to calculate distance, what regions are closest to, or what regions form around each point, that is to say, for every location on this grid, which one is closest to which point. And then, of the regions that are formed by those rules, which of them are not infinite? Which is a fun problem, because how do you check for an infinite region? Good luck. I leave that to you. But people build cool visualizations like this about them. Or here's one where I just sort of stumbled across this weird rule for a cellular automata where it ends up generating these wacky spirals for most input configurations. So most of the inputs for this puzzle were just random noise, and then the puzzle solver scripts looked for periodicity in the solution. So it would do a simulation and look for some kind of a loop, and when it found a loop like that, it knew that it had something like this, and as long as it was within certain parameters, it could use that as an input, and then it went forward, which means that everybody that was doing this got a cool picture like this if they did go and actually render it. And not all of them end up with cool pictures, but I especially like how this one turns out. This is a fun one. This is one that says, here's a bunch of points in 3D space. They all start with some velocity. Where do they collide? And so this person decided to use, I think, GNU plot to actually render in 3D all of the points colliding, which is kind of fun. So a lot of people like to use time to fill the leaderboard as a metric for difficulty. So this is a graph of that. I don't especially like this metric. because the people that are working on the leaderboard at midnight Eastern US time are mostly competitive programmers that do this stuff all the time, year-round, for lots of different competitions that are out. And so their skill set is very different from what a typical programmer might experience when they're working on one of these problems. But it's still an interesting thing to see. And it's interesting that for most of them, it's got this nice gradual, like, 30 minutes-ish at most kind of section, and then occasionally there are some puzzles that take the leaderboard a lot longer to do, and I'm very sorry. So let's talk about some growing pains. No, wait. Let's talk about learning experiences. So how do you prioritize tasks? I'm not great at prioritizing tasks. My task prioritization system, up until last year at least, looks something like this. Step 1, thing happens. Step 2, handle the thing. Step 3, go to 1. And this is great as long as there's only one thing at a time, or ideally 0 things ever. But let me change the question slightly. How do you prioritize tasks if you have 250,000 users from all around the world of all different backgrounds? Well, let's see how the model that I've been using goes. Step 1, thing happens. Great, okay, that's true for most projects, yep. Step 2, handle the thing. Yep, good, okay, yep, good. While you're handling the thing, several other things happen. And then you try to handle those things, but more things happen, and then you never sleep. Don't do this. This is a terrible system. So instead, there comes a point where you have to actually stop and prioritize things, which sounds goofy to say out loud, but if this is a personal project that's turned into a thing like this, that's not trivial, especially if you don't have a team to fall back on. And I have family and friends that help out a lot with this stuff, but it's still the sort of thing where being okay with stopping and asking for help isn't always easy to do, but it's important. Other things that you can do are to write better documentation, specifically instructions for users, so that instead of emailing you and saying, hey, how do I achieve this, how do I do this thing, they can just find it and understand it or something. Have an incredibly supportive community that helps itself. I don't have any recommendations for how to get this. It just sort of congealed. We had a subreddit pretty early on, and the people that joined it were just extremely helpful people. And then more people joined and kind of got this like culture of helping each other. And all of a sudden now if you go to the subreddit, it's just a bunch of people that instead of being like, oh, here's your bug, the answer is this, they say, have you tried this input? Did you see what happens if you run this thing? Or what happens if the input is slightly different in this way? And just try to like lead people slowly toward the answer in a way that helps them learn what their problem is, instead of just saying, well, you know, you just did it wrong. And they're very positive, and it's incredible, and I'm so thankful for it. I don't know how you can get one of these for your project. I wish I did. And to automate tasks and provide self-service tools. So ideally, where possible, you want to minimize the number of requests that you're receiving by making it so that people don't have to send you requests, by being able to do things on their own, which I've done to some extent and I need to do a lot more of, but it's a good step to take. Accessibility becomes extremely important. If you have a project where it's just like a couple of your friends doing it, then, you know, accessibility. If you're doing a project that a ton of people all around the world are doing, you may want to follow some accessibility guidelines, carefully test things, and actually take feedback seriously, which is very important. I have a vision impairment. I have a friend that has a hearing impairment, so we're already pretty careful about this stuff, and we still find problems where somebody has some situation in which the site doesn't work well for them, and they email me and I say, well, that's really unfortunate, please let me help you. How can I best change the site to accommodate your needs? Is there a way that I can do this and make the site work for you? And typically I can find a way to do it. Denial of service attacks. Why would you attack a programming puzzle website? Like, what? I don't know, but we get these. The servers went down earlier last year, I think it was, where all of a sudden, tons and tons of IP ranges just DDoS to the site. Why you would choose to do this with your expensive DDoS botnet, I don't know. Fortunately, blocking whole IP ranges is not something I'm opposed to, because I'm not a business, really. I'm more of just a bunch of fun puzzles, and so I just blocked those ranges for a while, and then they went away, and I went and did something else. Couple frequently asked questions that I just like to go over anyway because I get them all the time. Why do the puzzles unlock at midnight UTC -5? Or a very popular question, why don't you make the puzzles unlock at a different time every day? Very often phrased as, hey, I just realized that if you move it by an hour every day, you'd hit every hour. Like, yes, those are true. I would die because I have to be awake at that time every night to make sure that the servers are working and that nothing has gone wrong. And so I choose midnight UTC -5 because that's when I can be awake to help people and make sure that I'm there because I also have like a job during the day. How long does it take to make 25 puzzles? 3 or 4 months of all of my spare time, which I'm still doing right now, and when I get back home I will be continuing to do. It's literally, I go to work, I come home, I work on puzzles, I go to bed, I get up, and I repeat for 3 or 4 months. It's a ton of work. Worth it, but it takes a long time. Can I send you puzzle ideas? Please don't. For reasons of copyright and attribution and infringement and weird legal things that I can't begin to understand because I'm not a lawyer, I'm just a puzzle author. If your email looks like a puzzle idea, I will simply reply back, your email looks like a puzzle idea. I didn't read it, I'm very sorry. Please see the About page where I explain why. If it's not a puzzle idea, feel free to reply back and maybe I'll, look at it or have somebody else check it. But I don't want to like accidentally look at somebody else's idea and then not realize that I've used part of their idea in one of the puzzles that I thought that I had created, but really, and it's just like, it's a whole mess. Please don't send me puzzle ideas. I have more ideas than I need right now. Why is the site rejecting my answer? Often you didn't copy and paste the input correctly, honestly. Like a lot of times when the site isn't accepting your answer, it's because you copied only part of the input string, or you tried to paste it into a terminal that has some kind of an input buffer limit and it only pasted the first, 4096 characters or something like that. Sometimes you missed a sentence. Sometimes you missed an assumption completely. Ask for help on the subreddit. People are extremely supportive. Does the site lock after getting a wrong answer? Or very rarely, why do I have to wait an hour to submit my next guess? So the site does lock after getting a wrong answer. It locks for 60 seconds. That number increases a little bit if you have many failures. Anybody that asks why it's locking them out for an hour wrote a script that tried every number in a loop and all of a sudden discovered that they can't use the site anymore. Yes, this happens. No, don't do it. How do some people solve the puzzle so quickly? Are they cheating? So if you look at the leaderboard, there are some days where people will have solved the puzzle in 1.5 minutes, or 2 minutes, or 5 minutes, or some unfathomably fast speed for whatever the difficulty of the puzzle is. Are they cheating? No, surprisingly, they're not cheating. If the question, the follow-up question is often, how do they read the whole puzzle in that amount of time? I haven't even gotten through the first paragraph and they've already submitted the answer. The answer is they don't read the puzzle. They look at the input, because the input's secretly all that really matters. They look at the last line of the puzzle, where I put the actual question that I'm trying to ask. They outright guess at what I'm actually asking, and they go implement that. And then, as they're going through, if they have questions, they'll go back to the text and skim it for a definition that I've given of some noun or something someplace. And these people are typically people that do competitive programming in puzzles like this year-round, and they're highly rated on many of these sites. And they have a lot of experience with the kinds of questions that a site that asks you for one specific answer can ask. And as soon as you have that sort of familiarity and that sort of experience, and you're really good at data structures and algorithms, and you're writing in a language that runs really quickly so you can cut some corners and it still completes in a reasonable amount of time, you can solve these puzzles that quickly. I don't recommend doing this. I think they missed the point, but I'm really glad that they found a way to enjoy the site. If you still think they're cheating, check the subreddit. Some people post videos of themselves solving the puzzle. They really do this, and it's completely incredible. And I'd like to end with a couple stories that I think just are interesting of things that I've run into while running the site. This is one that just gets me right here. This person writes, as the non-participating mother of a 14-year-old who got up at 4:50 a.m., I'm both massively impressed that people do this and somewhat baffled that nothing else has this effect. I've been reading here, the subreddit, so that I can make sense of the conversation later in the day. So this is a mother of some 14-year-old that starts to talk about weird programming puzzles that they got up at 4:50 a.m. in the morning to do, and all of a sudden the conversation, instead of being about what they did in school that day, was about this wacky programming puzzle that they did online this morning. And this poor mother is like, what are you saying? How do I figure out these words? And they go to the website to try to, the subreddit, to try to just decipher their poor kids' like new dialogue that they're trying to make. I love this. I get a lot of these, which is both surprising to me and also really heartwarming. Thank you for Advent of Code, something, 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 got a job from it, right? And the stories all vary, but the emphasis is all the same, where they used Advent of Code to either gain skill or to practice interviewing or something like that, and then contact me afterward and they say, hey, I got a job and I feel like you contributed to that. Like, that's really cool. You're not one of the 50 people I was expecting to do it, but I'm really glad you did. That's great, right? Or people that say things like, my son and daughter are becoming more interested in coding because of your site. Or there's a story that I can't find that's similar to this one, where they say something like, actually, do I don't know if, no, I don't, okay. Where they say something to the effect of, I haven't had a good relationship with my daughter for years, but we've started to do Advent of Code together, and now we are like back to talking every day. And it's like, are you, like, excuse me? Like, I can't. That's still like, all right, that was never one of the goals I set out to do, but I'm very glad that that worked out for you. Some people use it for university coursework. There are actual university courses, including one that's coming up this next year that the professor's already emailed me a couple times about, where they're going to do a course, I forget where this is, Canada somewhere? I forget. There's literally a course where they're going to be doing an Advent of Code problem every day during the duration of the course, and they don't know what the problems are yet. And I don't reveal what the problems are to anybody except the beta testers. And they're just going to go through and do these as coursework. Like, all right, like, I'm doing some things this year that might not work well in a course setting. Good luck. Or people, professors that will assign Advent of Code problems as homework. Or professors that will assign them for the midterm exam of their course. And then the final. So in conclusion, engineers in your organization should solve puzzles for fun. And not just engineers in your organization. Everyone should solve puzzles for fun. It helps you learn to think about the world in a different way. It helps you understand new ideas and look at things in a new perspective and just figure out the world and how to approach problems. It helps you in your daily life, regardless of whether you're an engineer or not. And it's really, really, really important that you just engage your mind in something like this, be it Advent of Code or anything else, right? Like, find something that works for you, but do something like this that enriches you and learn from it and grow from it. Thank you very much. I was promised a clock, and there is no clock, so I have no idea what my time is.
Press go. Press forward. It's not there.
No, it's not.
So surely... Oh, hang on, sorry.
Oh.
Better.
Hello.
Hello. Hello?
No.
No.
Yes.
There we go. There.
Ah.
No. Better. Okay. I'm sure you've got some questions for Eric. You must have. You definitely have. Do you wanna wang out Nigel, or shall I do it?
So remember that vision deficiency I mentioned? It impairs depth perception. You may not like that.
May not like it or love it.
Depends on whether you have good insurance.
Marcus? Do we have good insurance? Yeah, go on. Treat yourself. I believe in you, man. Him. Wang it right at his face.
This is not a good idea, just to be clear.
Nailed it.
No, we're almost down to 9 cameras.
That's good, that's good. That's 10 less pounds.
Yeah, right?
Okay, so thank you so much for doing Advent of Code. I have so many questions for you. What time of the year do you typically start to plan for the next year? Or are you like ready with this year's challenges, or do you like start in January, or do you like, oh, all challenges for next 5 years are already done?
So I think I've lost the order of your questions, so I'll just address them chronologically by year instead. I don't start in January. That would kill me. I would be literally dead. By the time that December's over, I'm basically unconscious. I typically get some worse version of the flu by the end of December because I'm such a nervous wreck from having that many people look at something that I've made. You always hear creators talk about like, well, you know, being a creator is so hard because people looking at your stuff, and you're like, oh yeah, whatever. No, it's really stressful. And no, January is for me to lie in a dark room for a while and just pretend I don't exist. I typically aim to start around April. This year that didn't work out because, as I mentioned before, I switched jobs this year, and so instead of working on Advent of Code, I worked on switching jobs. The puzzles are not done yet, but they're close, and I have them all planned. So it's just a matter of constructing them all now. I know what I'm going to do. And I have a list of hundreds of puzzles ideas that I've put together over the years that are ready to go if I need to pull from for more. In past years, I've started much later than that, which has shown to be a very bad idea. And so as such, I'm trying to start earlier and earlier.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. If you have time, other than working or doing the puzzles, what do you do?
Other than working or doing the puzzles. So you didn't exclude programming, which if you saw on a slide back toward I won't skip back to it. If you saw back toward the beginning, lots of other cool projects, none of which have caught on like this one did. Can I just jump back? Oh, I can. Hey. Like this. Nope, there. I write a lot of Perl code, random Perl modules and stuff, other programming challenges for employers or other organizations. I help run hackathons sometimes, a bunch of random other tools and kits and projects and stuff here. A lot of tooling for video games. Video games is how I relax. I think Lena talked about Dance Dance Revolution. Yes. Dungeons & Dragons, which I love and have since I was little. Otherwise, a lot of programming. Playing with my dog.
Thank you.
Pretty boring.
Anyone else?
I got a quick question.
Yeah.
Which World of Warcraft add-ons have you worked on?
None that ever caught on. The World of Warcraft add-ons that I built were more for fun to learn about protocol development and that sort of thing. So I built some add-ons that worked as an underlying framework, which basically just let me teach myself Lua. And then on top of that, I built a framework that let you encode arbitrary data and pass it around as chat messages, which involves a lot of encoding because back in vanilla, when I was working on these things, certain characters would just outright break chat. And so I built some things that would let you like encode packets and specify ports that you could listen on as if it were TCP, and then I built a couple add-ons on that, none of which ever caught on or did anything. So the add-ons weren't as interesting as the playing with Lua and stuff. By the way, if you've never written anything in Lua, Lua is fantastic. It's so much fun.
Thank you.
Sure.
Hi. So I was wondering if you would ever make Advent of Code a business or make it bigger than only yourself, so maybe have a team of people marketing the platform, or so that it would be more accessible for even more people around the world.
Maybe. I think about a lot of stuff like that, and always when I'm trying to figure that sort of thing out, the question always comes down to, would doing that help more people get better at programming? My goal isn't to turn this into a business where I charge everybody $1 a puzzle or something like that, right? It's all free. My goal is to make everybody better at programming, and in doing so, things that turn it into a business model, like, while that would be really cool, always have to be weighed against that. So we're trying to figure some stuff like that out. My wife is really, really good at business, and we talk about this stuff a lot, but I don't have any specific plans right now for it.
Hi. Which has been the most difficult puzzle during the years? Have any idea?
So that's not a fair question, but not for the reason you might think. The trick is that difficulty is extremely subjective. And I talked about that a little bit earlier, where difficulty isn't just the complexity of the problem, but it also comes from the background of the person that's doing it, their experience level in general, the language that they're using, the tools that they have available. There were a bunch of puzzles a few years ago where Python could just type itertools, enter, and it would be solved. There were a couple puzzles last year that itertools never came up once because it had nothing to do with that. The puzzle that typically took people the most time, which has nothing to do with difficulty, was the elves versus the goblins in the underground thing, where it was a really, really long text. The tricky thing about that puzzle is that that's also the puzzle that I got the most feedback of people that really enjoyed doing it of any puzzle that year too. So it's really hard to say. Difficulty ends up being which one was hardest for any individual, because they all vary. The beta testers rate every puzzle on difficulty so that I can try to get a feel for whether I'm way off base with something. And I have puzzles that beta testers have simultaneously rated very easy and very hard all at once. And so it varies wildly from person to person.
Always going for it.
This is not a safe game.
It's entertaining, though.
It is.
So if we want to help you keep doing this without burning out and without having to abandon the project because you're just dead by the end of the month, how can we help you? Like, do you want fan mail? Do you want monetary contributions?
So I do accept monetary contributions. I don't expect them. I am very appreciative when I get them. And it helps me justify spending more time on it in years afterward. The best thing that helps, though, is being supportive to each other, to other users on Twitter and on Reddit and elsewhere on the internet. Like I said before, the community that's already formed around this is extremely supportive, but anything that's in the public view will eventually get criticism. And with 250,000 people looking at it, even anything that affects only 0.1% of users will get a bunch of negative feedback, because that ends up being a large number of people. And the thing that stresses me out the most is when I get negative feedback about something where it's like, all right, well, you know, nobody's forcing you to do this. Nobody's like demanding this of you. I'm really sorry that it you know, hurt your feelings or something. Please don't do the puzzles if you're not enjoying them. And the most incredible thing that happens afterward is often that I don't have to reply, because 18 people already have, being like, hey, where are you having trouble? Like, how can we help you? Like, how can we support you? Because it sounds like you're struggling and we'd really like you to succeed at this. And it's like, I don't even know any of these people and they're all backing each other up. Like, this is amazing. Being somebody like that is the thing that is the most supportive of me, probably, because it means that me or the moderators on the subreddit or other people like that don't have to, like, it's one less thing that we have to worry about as somebody that's having a struggle that we wish could succeed, and we wish we could help them. Other than that, I don't know. I'm hoping that for the preparation stress, it'll be very, very much lower in future years, because I don't intend to switch jobs that often. The job I had before the one I just switched into, I had for almost 10 years, so it's not the sort of thing that'll screw up my schedule next year, hopefully, right? So, but yeah, no, that's a great question. I'm waiting for someone to just get decked in the face by this thing.
That's the plan.
You're not supposed to admit that.
How much does the infrastructure cost?
The infrastructure, so I don't like to get into details about that sort of thing. The infrastructure grows pretty rapidly, though. The growth year over year is something like 2.5 times the number of users every year, which means that I'm constantly growing in servers and in like storage costs and in network throughput costs and in all of those things. And AWS loves to charge you for every single type of network egress that you do, and so fortunately, right now, my costs are covered, but I'm also about to like double or triple the number of servers I have, because last year we came really close to running out of CPU, if nothing else. And so, you know, it depends on the year, it depends on the number of users. Right now, it's below what I'm receiving in support, which is great because it means that I have some money left over to, like, you know, buy dinner from it. But yeah, I don't know.
So, yeah, hi.
Hello.
First of all, let me say thank you for Advent of Code.
You're very welcome.
Yeah, I really like the challenges. I'm really looking forward to this year's challenges.
I'm looking forward to them too. Yeah. There's some cool stuff. I won't tell you about them, but there is some things I'm very excited for.
Yeah, I'm really excited too. And like my goal this year is that I really, really want to be able to achieve a global point, because that would be like a dream come true. Do you have any tips on how I can prepare until December?
Prepare for the puzzles this year?
Yeah. I had to ask.
I do have some tips, but I can't tell you what they are because it would be spoilers. Do past year's puzzles. Review other people's solutions for them. See if there's places you can improve on those. The puzzles do have a format that's consistent year over year because there's only certain ways that I can ask questions. So the puzzles that I have asked have at least some similar structure. But beyond that, the topics that I will be asking about this year will vary, especially even from past years. I'm asking some different kinds of things. I'm trying to introduce some other kinds of concepts. For anything further than that, you're going to have to prepare after the puzzle comes out.
Okay, thank you.
Good luck.
Right, so I have a question for you. So you talked about the puzzles now today, and but I love Advent of Code. It's adorable, but it's also the stories, the little flavor texts, and the aesthetics of the website and so on. Mm-hmm. So how much do you enjoy those parts of the Advent of Code?
How much do what?
How much do you enjoy creating the style of it and the flavor texts, and how much do you work with those, and how much do you enjoy those parts that you haven't talked so much about today?
So the prose and stuff is not a majority of the work, and it's partly because the prose is a tiny fraction of the puzzles in general. It's almost always that there's a paragraph or maybe two of story, and the story just sort of is, you know, whatever goofy thing I come up with, and I partly intend to leave big gaps in the story because I think that it's fun for the person reading it to be able to kind of fill in the gaps however they think is fun, and that's completely acceptable. And also partly because the worlds that I describe when I'm doing this sort of stuff are intentionally ridiculous. Just to sort of give an offset to the very serious nature of, you know, writing a bunch of code and having to figure out this thing, and sometimes it's very hard, and to give it a more relaxed tone. The extent to which the prose, like the story part, affects the puzzle part is negligible. So when I rearrange puzzles, like I said, if the difficulty isn't quite right and I have to tweak some things, moving around puzzles involves rewriting the story for those sections. And it ends up not being too much of a problem because I can take the nouns that are important in the story. If it's about elves, I can make it about whatever, I can make it about this other character or whatever, and that's not really a problem. So I can swap out the nouns in that part and just rewrite the story to kind of fit in wherever it is in the month, and it's not a huge deal. That happens more frequently than you might think too, where I've had whole storylines that I've had to throw out and rewrite because there was a key puzzle that made that story make sense that I had to move somewhere else and retool for something, and now all of a sudden this story has to be different or something like that. So it varies, but for the most part it's ridiculous to be fun, and also it makes it easier to write. Like, I'm not an author. I play one on TV, but I'm not an author. I don't consider myself a good story writer, but I appreciate when people tell me that they really enjoy seeing the elves do something dumb today, and it's like, oh, well, that's wonderful. Also, how was the puzzle? I'm glad it was good. Okay, good, right, you know, whatever.
Okay, I think we have time for one quick question. Behind you.
So, what inspired you to become a puzzle creator?
I enjoy helping people become better programmers. And that's something that I've enjoyed for a long time, long before I started writing puzzles of any sort. There are other puzzles online that came before Advent of Code that I built. Like I mentioned, I have one that I built for my previous employer called the Cinecore Challenge, which I built mostly as just sort of a recruiting effort, but it was something that was interesting. Before that, I worked on a bunch of other much smaller initiatives and other like brain teasers and other things like that, you know, were very small and mostly just between my friends and that sort of thing. But all of those came out of my desire to help somebody, often a friend of mine or a coworker or something, get better at some particular skill or get better at some particular programming technique or learn a new algorithm that they didn't know, or I was doing a training at work that required that people learned a certain type of way to approach a problem or to do something with regular expressions. And to say, well, these are the ways that, regular expressions, for example, work. Like, here's the documentation. Feel free to read it. But here are some ways you can apply them. Here's a bunch of cool problems you can do, and take the knowledge that you've learned and apply it to these things that I've just come up with. And it just sort of came out of that as this desire to help people get better and to teach and to support them. And all of a sudden I realized if I just made a bunch of those and framed them as puzzles in a little calendar, that would, solve that. It just sort of grew from there.
Okay, thanks.
Cool. See that?
I do see that. The time came up.
0-0.
Just in time to tell me that I'm out of time.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Very welcome.
Very exciting stuff.
Yeah.